You're not often home alone, right?
Oh my gosh.
I never answered because it was way too shady for me, and unfortunately he didn't insist.
At least she sees
Unfortunately,
this.
because if he did, I would have probably blocked him.
Right. I remember hearing the term doxing a long time ago, and I didn't really know what it meant until I found out that it was a form of social engineering. And social engineering is essentially getting little bits of information from a person, information that they divulge or they make available to you, and using that information to manipulate them or get more information out of them, more personal details or more important details, like using a person's name and maybe the last four of their social security number for verification purposes in order to find out where they live so they can steal mail from them, and so on and so forth. Doxing, however, is using the information that you get from a person to pose harm to them through the internet by making that information available. So doxing someone may be like revealing my personal address, my home address, to the majority of the internet for people to see and use however they see fit. And naturally, a bunch of bad things can come out of that. And I wasn't really familiar with the term, but I had received at one point a few nudges from friends saying that some of the information that I was letting out on my social media accounts were allowing people to get too much information. And one of my friends was actually able to triangulate my street, the actual street that I lived on at the time, from the information that I put out. And I was scared. I wasn't scared that he had it. I was just scared that it would be available to people that wanted it. And I immediately took down the posts that were in question. And ever since then, I've been a little bit more careful. I let people know that I live, what areas that I live in, and I try not to divulge certain bits of information that would give people an idea of the important things that I want to keep near and dear in order to keep my family's privacy private, I guess you could say. So anytime I see social media stories that kind of give me an indication that they're going to be going down that road, I automatically want to watch them, because it's near and dear to me, because I've felt that kind of feeling before, and it can be very, very scary. And it also kind of teaches me lessons on maybe what I didn't think of before and what not to do in order to stay for this. And I think we all could probably learn a lesson today from this Twitter horror story by MJV Animations. Make sure to head on over to their channel, click the subscribe button and the notification bell. And if you like reaction videos like this, make sure to subscribe to this channel as well. Let's get into the animation.
I'm a female. I'm turning 19 this year, but this story happened when I was 15.
It's always
I'm also
jarring
from France.
because the voice, you know.
When I was 15 and just got into my junior year, I created my first Twitter account that I deleted because of this story.
Okay.
I didn't tell
followers.
anyone my username, neither my family nor my friends, because I didn't have any.
Right.
My profile picture was an avatar, so no pictures of me on the account.
Okay.
And as far as location, I said Paris because I lived in the suburbs.
That's pretty generic.
I didn't have many followers, 20 or maybe 30, and I didn't follow that many people, so my timeline wasn't really that interesting.
Right.
One evening in October, someone sent me a quite strange direct message. It was a 200 followers account, and the message was like, "Hi, my name is Rob. I just turned 17 and wanted to know if you lived in," stating my hometown.
Okay.
Because I'll soon move in and go to that town's high school, and I'm looking for friends.
She didn't
The
give
town
that
he said was
information.
obviously the town I lived in. I immediately thought something was wrong because there was nowhere on my profile I said where I actually lived, but after some time thinking, I remembered of a tweet that I made weeks ago about buses, and I mentioned the city, so I told myself that he must have looked up for that town and found my tweet.
That's how it starts, though. Like, someone had to do some digging and volunteer the fact that they knew more about you than you obviously tried to indicate on your profile. And it's not that much of a prying question, the way that he went about it, but like she said, she felt bad. Honestly, if you're if you're very naive to this type of stuff, you may just dismiss it as coincidence. Not necessarily coincidence, but dismiss it as something that couldn't potentially be harmful to divulge a little bit more information because they're being friendly, you know? And that's how stuff like that starts.
His age wasn't shocking because I'm 2 years ahead of my classmates.
Okay.
I was bored, and since he was polite, I answered him.
Mm-hmm.
I told him that I was indeed from that town and I go to the high school there.
I got a bad feeling
The
already.
discussion was natural, and we talked a lot that night, mainly about high school, about the food at the cafeteria, about the teachers, that kind of thing. But as it was getting very late, he tried to interpose some personal questions like,
Sure.
Do you live far away from the school? In a house or an apartment? Do you live with both your parents? There's 5 of you?
That's questions that he's using to narrow down what type of location she's in. Like there's a lot of public information that you can use in order to narrow down a search. And things like these questions aren't necessarily available, but when you start asking a person and they start giving you that information, that spectrum of variables becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until you can pick out who they are and therefore know a bunch more about them.
You're not often home alone, right?
Oh my gosh.
I never answered because it was way too shady for me, and unfortunately he didn't insist.
At least she sees
Unfortunately,
this.
because if he did, I would have probably blocked him.
Right.
The next day, the same thing. We talked a lot, and he was still asking personal questions to know me better, so I asked him too, and he always answered with what seemed like honesty. I still didn't answer the questions about my house, though, because he didn't need to know anything.
Right, exactly.
It lasted 2 or 3 weeks, but it was enough for me to develop feelings for him.
Oh,
He
dang.
was handsome, super kind, and it was everything I needed because I had been bullied for years, and even today, I still develop strong feelings, but most importantly, blind trust in people who are friendly to me.
And I kind of am
In
like
France,
that
in
too.
October, we have a 2-week-long vacation, and the day before back-to-school day, he finally told me he was coming to my high school because he had finally moved in with his mom and asked about a place to meet during the morning break. I was so happy and relieved to be able to meet him and told him to join me in the hall. But when he understood that there would be people around, he said that he would prefer an isolated place because he was afraid he would not recognize me and didn't want to spend the break looking for me. It was a good excuse for me, so I told him to meet me in the 3rd floor bathroom because we weren't allowed to stay there during the breaks and no one would disturb us.
In the bathroom where there's no cameras? No, Missy, that is not a good place at all. What about the 3rd bench from the left next to the water fountain? Like, you can be specific. I got a bad feeling, y'all.
In my head, even though it was a little bit creepy, I was still in school, so nothing could happen to me. Next day, back to school day, I made myself pretty. I wore my best clothes, I counted down the minutes, and finally, when break time had arrived, I ran to the bathroom and waited. And when he arrived, it was him. He wasn't a catfish. He looked quite like his profile, but I still noticed that he seemed a little bit older than he had told me.
All right.
I thought 20 years old instead of 17.
So when he said in the bathroom, they're just outside the bathroom. They didn't actually go in the bathroom yet. That's a little bit better of a replay. I still have a bad feeling, though.
We talked a lot, we got along well, and I was so pleased. And at the end of the break, he had asked me to go to the fast food restaurant with him for lunch. I said no because I didn't have any money and I always refuse for people to pay for me. It's kind of my principle. He seemed disappointed but offered to walk me home after classes. I explained I have to take the bus, but that he could walk me to the bus stop. He looked disappointed, again, but finally accepted.
He's really fishing to get some alone time with her. Like, you can tell. And honestly, to this point, there's nothing that is overly, I guess you could say, sinister and obvious, but his persistence with getting her alone and separating her from people scares me, man.
And that's exactly what happened, and it was so great that it quickly became some kind of routine. We met in the 3rd floor bathroom during the morning break, and he walked me to the bus stop after classes.
Okay.
A surprising fact is that I never saw him in the hallways nor at the cafeteria.
Because he doesn't go
But
to
I
that
thought
school.
that at the time that the building was huge and there was over 1,500 students in here, so if our schedules didn't coincide, there was no way we could meet each other. This little game lasted until December, so almost a month and a half. The 14th of December, a Thursday, I complained about how lonely I was going to be that evening because my dad was abroad for work. My brother was always at his friend's house. My little sis was on a school trip, and my mom had to work late that very night. It was very reckless of me, but after weeks, I thought I could trust him.
Yeah.
That evening, he walked me to the bus stop. We both waited. I got in the bus, waved at him, and put on my earphones.
I don't think that's reckless.
I had 2 stops before my house. It was about 5:45 p.m. in December, so it was already really dark outside, and as I got out of the bus, I had a really bad feeling.
So, I really don't think she did anything wrong outside of giving a little bit of information. He, outside of his little bit of persistence, he hasn't given her any indication that he's trying to manipulate her. He's being friendly. Time has passed. He's not insisting. Kind of like when she said that he wasn't insisting for her to answer these personal questions. He's just asking them, which could be genuine curiosity in most cases, and you can't always be so suspicious of people. But again, she's a little bit vulnerable because she feels lonely, and he's been giving her a lot of attention. She was bullied, in school and all of this stuff. So a little bit of flattery can go a long way if your heart is mending. You know what I mean? You feel good. People make you feel good. You want to like them. You want to trust them. And that's when stuff gets crazy, man.
There was that very uncomfortable sensation in my stomach, and I felt like I was being watched. I pressed the pause on my music, but kept my earphones in, so that people thought that I couldn't hear anything.
Who's behind you, girl?
And that's probably what saved my life. I lived in a suburban neighborhood, very silent, especially at night, so there was no visibility on the big road that the bus dropped me off on.
Right.
When I heard footsteps behind me, I understood that I was right. There was someone following me, and he was not well-intentioned.
That's your boy?
At least, I could hear that he was not accelerating, so he was not trying to catch up to me, but I couldn't guess how long it would last. As quietly as possible, I tried to reach for my keys in my pocket, and when I finally pulled them out, I ran, as fast as I could. The best sprint of my life. I don't know how it worked, but I managed to open and to close the door before he could reach me. I then deactivated my alarm, which, by the way, confirmed that I was home alone, and took a look through the glass panel on the door. It's not a peephole, it's a whole window, so if someone wanted to see what's happening inside, they can.
Right.
And it was Rob. A few meters away, looking at me with a really creepy face. He followed me to my home, probably with a car, and he was clearly not here for a chit-chat.
Right.
I still don't know why I didn't call the police then. I was completely paralyzed. We both stared at each other for a few minutes, and when I took back control over my body, I ran into the kitchen to get a knife and got back to the door.
Dang.
He was there too, banging against the door.
Banging against the door.
I feared for a second that the glass would break, but it didn't. That moment, when I was pushing against the door, praying for it not to break while he was kicking harder and harder, was the longest I've ever experienced.
Can you
After
imagine?
maybe 5 minutes, he stopped and got around the house, knocking against every shutter, and got back to the door. He looked angry, but then my neighbor's car reached my house, and Rob ran away, probably thinking it was my mom coming home.
Goodness, man.
On Twitter, Rob sent me 1,000 messages before I could block him. He then deleted his account, and I thought I was done with his story.
What the
But
heck?
quickly after, some accounts which had been created followed me. Their ats were all a series of numbers and the first letter of his name,
Obviously.
and as soon as I blocked one, another one would follow me. I chose to delete my account because I couldn't make it stop, and it was too hard to endure because they were sending me dozens of insulting DMs.
Dang.
Later, I talked to the people who were supposed to be Rob's classmates because I haven't met him again in days, but not a single one even heard about a Rob.
He never been to school.
This guy was never a student in my high school.
Right.
And that is why I've never met him apart from our daily meetings, and that is probably why he seems so old. I never heard about him anymore, and I'm still asking myself, what did he want? And what could have happened that night?
I mean, that's stalker behavior 101, right? You know, using the internet to track somebody down, it's kind of weird. You could do it all. He didn't know what she looked like, but it was an easy way to fish. You have no idea how many people he was doing this to until he finally got one to bite. And then when he saw an opportunity, he started putting effort into that. He may have been doing it for, to multiple people as well. You never know. But people like that, I mean, they suffer from, all sorts of their perception of reality is different than normal people. They want something and they're not scared of the consequences to get it, and they are, in order to get it, they'll manipulate people and do things that are just terrible. If you got the guts to go to somebody's door and beat like that after they know that you followed them all that time, he had a good understanding of what was going on in the house, so he probably felt pretty secure by doing that. But I mean, guys, hey, if my neighbor's getting his house door beat on, I have close neighbors, and I probably wouldn't know in this office. You know what I mean? So I don't know, man. I would think that a man his size could have probably kicked in the door or the window, like if he really was deranged about it, but I'm not sure. At any rate, y'all, safeguard your info. Just be careful. Not to say that you shouldn't trust people on the internet, because there's a lot of good people out there. I tend to be the kind of person that thinks, good things about people. I generally think that people are good, even though I know deep down we're all kind of animals inside. We all have selfish tendencies and behaviors, and some of us have self-control and others don't. And that's the ones that you have to watch out for, But at any rate, y'all stay safe and take care out there. I love y'all. I'll catch y'all next time, guys. Make sure to hit MJV Animations. His channel is going to be right there, as well as a couple other videos that I reacted to him from here. Thanks so much for watching. As always, this is Zueljin signing off, and we'll see you next time.